Here's a quick video on how you can view and analyze the fertility reports that are generated based on those records we've been looking at inputting on the mobile app, such as your joining, scanning, marking, and weaning records. To view these records, jump onto the web app and go to the Reports tab on the left-hand side of the screen. Once you're on the Reports tab here, you'll see under the mob records, you've got the reproduction records across the right-hand side here, which breaks these out individually into those specific records like your joining, marking, scanning, and weaning. To dive into each of these records, say for example your joining report here, you'll see at the top of the screen you've got your date selection. So you've got July 1st through to June, for example. If I wanted to say look at last year's records, and let's say we want to go from January through to August 31st, for example, you're able to adjust what you're visualizing in this report. What you can see now is you've got your sire here. So this is the mob name of that sire mob during the joining period and their mob size. You've then also got your dam mob name and also the dam mob size here. This then breaks this out into your join start and end date based on those movement records you would have input. And then you can see over here, you've got your duration, so how long that join lasted. Finally, you can see that the paddocks in which those joins occurred. So if there were instances where these mobs were moved together during that joining period between paddocks, you'll still be able to see a breakdown of which specific paddocks they were in. The last thing to note is you do have the customized columns. So for example, if you wanted to add in, say, management tag for some of these mobs, you can see here, there are your commercial bulls with the management tag, for example. You do also have the ability to print or export this report just based on these top right-hand options here. If we were then to dive into the marking report, you can see your date range again, selection is at the top. So the format will be very similar with a lot of these reports here. You can see now that you've got your total marked and then costs associated with that. And you can see down here, you can have your marking date. You've got your total marked. So as we looked at those marking reports before, if you were splitting them out at sex on a marking record, you'll then also see your distinction between females and males marked. But in this instance, you've just got your total marked here. You can then see this flows through to a marking percentage, and you also get your marking weight. So based on your marking weight and the number of head, you'll get what your total weight there is. You'll also see those costs. So when you're prompted to put in your marking costs or any other associated costs, that will come through. You can also see then the paddock that marking was recorded against, and then also the dam mob, so the name of the dam mob, and then finally your marked mob. So what's the name of that new mob that you've just created? Similarly with the other reproduction reports, if you looked at your pregnancy scan record, this just breaks it down into, again, your mob here, your scan date, and then your fetus counts over here. So how many empties versus singles, twins, and triplets that you had across that period. The final report, which is that weaning record, is quite similar to the marking. So you can see here you've got your total weaned at the top, your weaning date, and then the age class at weaning. You'll then also be able to see what your total head count was there, the average weight at weaning, and then pulling through those treatment costs and those cost per heads as well for those weaning records. Now, whilst these break these records down individually in these reproduction reports here, we do also at the bottom here have our fertility report, which is under the performance records down here. Now, what this report does is it combines for each of the maternal mobs all of the reproduction records that have been associated against that individual mob. As you can see here now, I've got my green tag heifers down here, which had the management tag of joiners. So what we'll do is we'll follow along this bottom line, for example. So you can see you had 102 joined dams. Of that, 102 of those were scanned, in which there was 100% scanning percentage from joined, as you can see over here. This then flows through to that marking. So you can see of that 102, there was 56 marked at a marking weight of 120. So this gives you that marking percentage, which is quite low here, of 0% from pregnant. This then breaks that down into a weaning percentage from marked, which in this case, if this mob hasn't been weaned yet, then you'll see you've got that 0%. One thing to note as well is if you aren't inputting each of these records chronologically, it will adjust the figures that you're actually visualizing here. So for example, you haven't got your scanned figures coming through. You can see whilst you've got your joining there, you don't have these scanned percentages. However, you do have your marking record. So whilst it's skipping those scans there, you can see you've got your total marked at 15, and then from that, your weaning percentage from marked is still 100. So it will still pull that information through, but it's just ensuring that you're putting these in chronologically so that you can actually get that full flow-on effect of what's actually happening. And this can be an extremely effective report for looking at, what those efficiencies are, or potentially where you can get some of those productivity increases from those fertility records that you are inputting into AgriWebb.